Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar for 2020, Resilient People, Remarkable Stories. My name is Tracy Duncan, and I work with the wonderful team here at FearLess. I'm very much looking forward to hosting and moderating this session with you today. Before I hand over to Alex Garrick, our CEO, to introduce today's speaker, and while everyone is still logging in and getting settled, just some general housekeeping. As always, in all of our webinars, we welcome any questions you may have during today's presentation. Please simply just comment in the Q&A section and we'll have time to answer these at the end of the session. Please also note this session will actually be recorded. We will forward the link to the recording in the coming days. Please feel free to share this with your networks. You can also stay connected with FearLess on our social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. It's on these channels we provide updates on our future webinars and events. Now, I'm just looking at the attendee list. I think we'll pretty much be ready to roll now. So good afternoon, Alex. I'll hand over to you now to introduce our amazing featured speaker, Kerrie Atherton.
Good. Thanks very much, Tracy, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. It's fantastic to be here. I hope everyone's safe and well, and I'm really looking forward to what's going to be a fantastic presentation by Kerrie Atherton. I'm not going to provide a formal bio to Kerrie because I don't want to steal her thunder. A lot of what's in her bio is very much her story, and I want to be able to let her tell her amazing story to everyone today as part of her presentation. I just want to quickly, though, go through how I met Kerrie and her involvement with FearLess over the last year or so. When I was putting together the program for last year's national conversation on the Sunshine Coast, I was very conscious about trying to find someone who was connected with the local community and who was doing a lot of really good work with local PTSD sufferers and helping them through their particular situations. And I came across Kerrie via LinkedIn. And I did a lot of research about Kerrie and her first book, which she, in the Stories of Hope series that she wrote. And immediately I was attracted to her story. It's an amazing story. And what makes it more amazing is the honesty by which Kerrie tells it. She's very forthright about her past and about some of the challenges that she faced. And more importantly, how she uses that to help other people in her community. And what we are here at FearLess, we're very, very keen on doing is to continue to promote that community focus when it comes to managing PTSD, not only in terms of the sufferers of PTSD, but their family members and loved ones. Kerrie presented at our national conversation last year, and she completely rocked the house down. She was absolutely amazing. And I still get people who attended that conference who say to me, it's almost been 12 months, how incredible Kerrie's presentation was that day. And over the course of the last year, Kerrie and I have worked very closely together to talk about how we continue to spread her work for us here at FearLess and through other means as well. In that time, she's written the second book. And it was my honour to be there at the book launch of her second book just before the coronavirus closed everything down in early March. So I'm really looking forward to this. I was always intending to have Kerrie speak to us in this year's series of webinars. She's an amazing person who I'm very proud to call my friend. And now I'm going to pass over to Kerrie. Over to you, Kerrie.
Thank you, Alex, for such lovely words. I really appreciate them, and I'm so grateful for the support that FearLess has given me in the journey of Stories of Hope. Welcome to everyone who was at the FearLess conference last year. I made many friends at that time, and it was such an incredible experience because there was people there from all walks of life who had experienced immense suffering themselves. And that was something that I found was so wonderful, to be able to sit with people who knew what suffering was about. But all the people at the conference were very intent on wanting to move forward with their life and recover from their pain. So it was an incredible experience. Welcome to any new friends that we have out there, people I haven't met yet. And today we have some of our authors listening in, and welcome to you. You are all my heroes and I love you all so much. You've made such a difference in my life. So thank you for being part of this book and part of my life. Resilience is the ability to bounce back, to recover quickly from misfortune, illness or depression. And something that I'd like to say that everything that I say today, they're not facts, they're not my opinions, but they're my observations of having been a counsellor for many years and having walked and done life with thousands and thousands of people who have battled addictions, and also what I've experienced in my own life. So everything that I say today is merely my observations. But one of my observations is that people that are resilient, they are people that revive. And the word revive means to live again, to receive again a life which is almost expired, to rekindle into a flame the vital spark which was nearly extinguished. And all the people in the book, including myself, have been at that point where we felt like our life was almost extinguished, but there was that resilience inside us that rose up and really wanted to live again and to make something purposeful from the pain that we'd experienced. So I'd just like to start with the foreword, and I'm very, very honoured that such a wonderful man who does work in an organisation that I admire so much, Lifeline, Robert Sams, Executive Director of Lifeline, has written the foreword for this book, and I'm just going to read that out because it's just incredible wording on resilience. As humans, sharing stories is fundamental to our growth and learning. We are social beings who crave connection with others, and the sharing of stories is just one way that we achieve this connection. It can be so powerful. Indeed, the stories shared by Kerrie and the authors in Stories of Hope Australia truly have the power to change people's lives through inspiring, encouraging and moving people toward hope. I was so touched by the first edition of Stories of Hope that I finished it in one sitting. I remember the setting, a hotel room during one of our Lifeline national conferences. You might think that after a few days together with colleagues discussing suicide prevention, that the last thing that I would want to tackle is a book about where people share stories of pain and suffering. Of course, that could be the case, except that this book is not just about stories of pain and hurt, but also of hope and how people have dealt with challenges through a way of being that I've come to know as resiliency. That is resilience. Rather than being a thing that is done or achieved, it is something that is ongoing as we learn, grow and develop as humans. It is through the offering of hope in the face of adversity and through stories of resilience that this book will hopefully encourage others to also share their stories. Whether this is with friends, family or others in the community or through seeking professional help. While we live in a world where the discourse is often centred around being strong and toughing things out, there are times when we also need to connect with others. However, this is not always easy, as Andy Fermo in the book describes in his story herein. Even though I had support, I was afraid of what others would think of me, and I saw it as a sign of weakness. I felt like I had failed, and I didn't want people to know I was vulnerable. I had totally lost my identity. I felt alone, afraid and hopeless. Despite this, Andy did seek help, and it is my hope that by sharing this story, Andy will encourage others to do the same. Kerrie truly has achieved her aim of creating a movement through Stories of Hope Australia, something so important and intrinsically linked to meeting our needs for human social connection. This book, filled with stories of courage and sharing vulnerabilities, helps us all to understand that hope can exist when we share ourselves with others. I recommend this book to you. So thank you, Robert, for those wonderful words. When I knew that I wanted to write the second book. I always had a desire when I wrote the first two, at least write 3. And I knew the second book was coming around, and I knew that the story that I had to share was about basically the last 15 years of my life. And it was a very difficult story to share because it's a journey of grief. I've always said that I have 2 stories, and in my first book I shared my first story. But my second story, to sit down and try and write that was I found it quite traumatic. And I knew that I had to deal with some things before I could write effectively to be able to help others move through their journey. In this book, we cover lots of different topics, and people experience post-traumatic stress for so many different reasons in life, but here in this book is just some of the things that people have been through. Grief, loss of loved ones, loss of dreams, accident, trauma recovery, infertility, bullying and public humiliation, stress, performance pressure, war, PTSD, illness, stroke, physical disability, being a carer for those with disability or an illness, bipolar, depression, addiction. And some of us have been through a lot of those things, not just one of those things. But every person in this book has shown great resilience and learnt through their journey. Resilience is the gift that comes out of hard times. Resilience is the ability to bounce back, and bounce back we have. So before I wrote my chapter, I knew that I had to try and deal with the trauma of losing my mum to cancer. And the reason that I hadn't done that after it's been 10 years now, was because I had so many other things happen over those 10 years. And our mind and body doesn't allow us to actually process things and process trauma unless we're in a secure enough space to do so. So I, up until this point, have not really been in such a place, and I'll explain why shortly. I haven't indicated all these things in the front of in my story in the book, because I didn't want people to read the first chapter and think, oh, this isn't a story of hope. So I really glazed over everything, but it very much is a story of hope. So I took about 5 days, and a couple of months before writing my story, I locked myself away. I didn't go out. I hardly saw anyone. Of course, I talked to family. But I took the bull by the horns, and I knew it was going to be a tough 5 days. And I sat in my room. I did those things which I do to help me process with pain. I listened to music that I found uplifting. I prayed, I read, I meditated, and I wrote down, and I knew that I had to get some new perceptions around my mum's death and my beliefs around that. And so it was 5 long days, but I came out of that time and I really felt like a real healing had taken place. And it was only then that I could actually sit down and start to write about grief. So my grief really started when we were moved up here from the Sunshine Coast 16 years ago. And when I told my parents that we were moving, my mum was absolutely devastated. And I held on to a belief right there that set in that I'd destroyed the remainder of my parents' life. And it was something that I carried for a long time. And it was such a burden. When I told my mum and dad, my mum was absolutely distraught, and we'd been a very, very close family, probably so unusually close because we all were involved in the Alcoholics Anonymous program together. Both my parents were alcoholics and they were sober through AA. We hardly had any family, and my parents had also had quite traumatic upbringings, and so we were theirs and they were for us, and we were a very close-knit type family. And we were each other's all, really. And so when I left and moved up here, I was really devastated, carrying that belief that I'd destroyed my parents' life. And a year before that, my mum was diagnosed, a year and a half, after we moved here, my mum was diagnosed with cancer. And she was in the fight for her life. And I was in Queensland, she was in Sydney, and this fretting set in about how is this journey going to take place? I can't be with her, I can't be near her. 2 years after she was diagnosed with cancer, her younger brother, who was only 6 years older than me, who I was close to, was also diagnosed with cancer and died suddenly after 3 years. After 3 months. And that was just very, very traumatic for our whole family. My dad then had a nervous breakdown. And in 2009, 3 months after that, my mum went into palliative care. Now, my mum was in palliative care for 11 months. But three months before my mum died, my husband was involved in an accident and he smashed his collarbone to pieces. And that was actually 3 weeks before my daughter's wedding. And so my daughter was married in September. My husband was recovering from this really severe accident. And then my mum passed away in the December. A year after that, 9 months after that, my daughter had our first granddaughter. And that was such an exciting time. But my daughter found out she was pregnant just after my mum died, and she was very, very sick with the pregnancy. So I couldn't actually process my mum's death because I had to get into gear then to help my daughter, who was really, really sick. And so that was that year. And then she had our little granddaughter, which was very exciting. And couple of years after that, my grandmother died. I've got a few notes here, so I'm just trying to recall everything, because when I did my timeline the other night, it took me so long to do, and it was something that it was very therapeutic for me to write down all this stuff, because I haven't actually been able to face it all and write it all down. Every time I would try and think about the events of the past 10 years, I would become so overwhelmed and so exhausted by thinking about it all. But prior to my daughter having our granddaughter, my cousin was killed 4 months after my mum in a motorbike accident. And then a year after my granddaughter was born, my grandmother died, my mum's mum. And then I lost some aunties and uncles as well. And in 2012, we went on a holiday, and my husband got food poisoning over there and ended up in hospital, and it was like the holiday from hell, and he became quite sick after that. And then in 2013, my uncle died, and I lost some more aunties and uncles. I lost my grandfather. 2014, I had been working the whole time. So I lost my mum. I had all these other traumas going on, and I was the chaplain at the largest school in Queensland, helping look after about 2,400 students and their families through very, very high-level situations like suicides, deaths, illnesses. And so I was also developing compassion fatigue while I was going along trying to manage my own grief and my own trauma. And everything just kind of came crashing down for me in 2014. And I went off on stress leave because I was experiencing a lot of bullying at work due to the role that I was in. And a couple of days after I went off on stress leave, we were involved in a high-speed accident, and we were hit by a car that at close range, it was going 120 kilometres an hour. We all developed severe whiplash, my son, my husband and I. And I tried to go back to work after that, but the enormity of the trauma that I'd been facing was too much, and I ended up having to leave my job. And I had a breakdown after that, and not long after that, my husband also then had a breakdown. And my dad was diagnosed with last stages of emphysema around a similar time. And I knew the barrel that I was looking down. I knew the journey that I'd done with my mum. And when my mum passed away, I knew that I still had my dad there, and I was very, very close to my dad. He was my number one encourager in life. We were like two peas in a pod. We were both musicians. We spoke every day on the phone. Every day he'd ring me and tell me he loved me. And I knew that in a couple of years that I would be going through this trauma all over again. And it was just so hard to handle. So what I did was I knew that the enormity of the pain and suffering I'd been through would hit me like a ton of bricks. So I used to sit down at the beach and I did what was called pre-grieving. And I would just purposely think about my dad and think about what was happening, and I would allow myself to cry and feel those emotions. And I believed that that was something that really was life-saving for me when it did actually happen. Around the time that my dad was in his last stages, my husband was diagnosed with osteoporosis and told that he had the bones of an 85-year-old and not to break a hip because he had a 90% chance of dying. And I just fell apart. It was like every security system that I had in my place was just stripped away. My husband also had to give up work because of his emotional state. And he was an absolute mess. So my dad passed away in 2016 and I totally hit rock bottom. Everything from the past 10 years just came crashing down on top of me, and I developed high anxiety and panic attacks. And it was then that I realised that I had PTSD. When I would try and lie down to sleep in the afternoon, I would just have this sheer panic come over me and my heart would start racing, and I eventually realised what it was, and it was PTSD from all the trauma. The January after that in 2017, my son had just gotten engaged and I started Stories of Hope, and that was a pivotal thing in my journey because I had found a purpose and I knew that my pain wasn't in vain and that I could use it to help other people. And it was that purpose that really was the catalyst for me to be able to get up in the morning and keep going. In the March, my son's engagement was broken off, and that was another very hard time for us. And then in 2017, in the August, he left home and moved to Sydney. And that was probably, next to my mum and dad dying, that was one of the saddest things in my life, because my son had walked beside me through all this trauma, and he and I were very, very close, and nothing prepares anyone for the empty nest syndrome. And I just felt so alone. You know, I had a sick husband and my son was gone. Yes, he was living in Sydney. He had a great job and that, but I was battling with how I felt. And the thing for me was that a lot of people go through a lot of difficult times in life, but I was an alcoholic who was trying to remain sober through all this pain. And I didn't drink, but I nearly did drink again. So I didn't have the vice. I was white knuckling it through life, through all this trauma. And I talk about this because I really wanted to go on medication, and I also wanted to book myself into a mental institution, because I just felt like I wasn't going to be able to make it emotionally. I'd been addicted to pills as a young person, so while I do feel that medication definitely is for some people. I fought so hard against that for myself because I had a fear that I'd become addicted to the medication again. But the saving grace for me, I think, was talking about how I felt. And it's something that's not always easy for everyone, but I had been used to talking about how I felt because I'd been in AA for many years, and I've been sober now for 38 years. But for all that time, I was used to getting up at meetings and just getting it out, speaking how I felt, being raw, and having people in my life that could speak into my life and give me a different perception to what was going on in my own head. And so that was like a real saving grace for me. The other strategies that I found really helped me overcome, and I'm going to move on to all the other amazing people in the book now, was crying. I've done a lot of crying, but it was having that purposeful grieving and processing time where I would allow myself to feel a little bit, and that's usually when I have quiet time in my room in a safe space, and that's where I do my crying. And then I'm like, that's enough. Now I have to go out there and I have to get on with my life. I need to be able to be okay, to be a wife, be a mum, be a nanny, do my job, do my purpose. But it was very important for me to continue to have that, and continue to this day to have that outlet where I allow myself to feel and pull that box out, but then put that box back in. And now I want to move on to an amazing human, Andy Fermo. So Andy's the next story in our book, and he went to war in Afghanistan. It was his dream job as a Special Forces commando, and he came back with PTSD. He witnessed 2 horrific events over there, and he was blown up himself. And when he went out to war, to that job, to his dream job, he had no idea what he was actually signing up for. And he had no idea what the future was going to be like. And I'm going to read a couple of the quotes from everybody's story because they're so powerful. But something Andy said was, I felt like I had failed and I didn't want people to know I was vulnerable. I had lost my identity. I felt alone and afraid and hopeless. But I saw an advocate who was someone who understood what I was going through because he too had lived experience fighting for his country. So with that quote, Andy's number one strategy was seeking help and talking to somebody else who understood a similar path that he'd been on. And I'm going to do this with every single person whose story is in the book. I've tried to feed out the different strategies to get as many strategies as I could out of their stories. A wide variety of strategies. Some use similar strategies, but something else Andy said was sometimes you just have to put your toe in the water to gradually start swimming again. So that was really finding a purpose. And sometimes just when the storm looks the darkest, the clouds can disappear and then out of nowhere the sun comes shining through. After attending last year's FearLess conference and meeting so many like-minded people, it really gave Andy clarification and was true confirmation that the things he was putting into place for the charity that he had started, Invisible Injuries, was something that was very much needed and would be able to support veterans and their carers. And it really encouraged him to know that he too could carry out his purpose. So that's a little bit about Andy. I'm just going to get my papers ready now. Donna is the next incredible human in our book, Donna Thistlethwaite. And I first saw Donna share her story on Australia Story, and I was just so blown away that this beautiful person had struggled so much, but was so brave to get up there and share her story with the world. And I asked her to speak at Stories of Hope, and I was so thrilled when she did. So for Donna, she had mounting work pressure that came on quite suddenly after a promotion, and she'd been in HR managing many staff for a long time, and self-defeating beliefs that she'd held for a long time started to come into play, and expectations that she had put on herself for what she needed to do for this next job coming up just became so pressurizing for her that she became mentally unwell over a short period of time. And so much so that she believed that life was hopeless, and she walked up to the Story Bridge one day and jumped off. Fortunately, Donna survived, and I'm so glad she did, because she has helped so many people through her amazing journey of survival. She went on then to work for Lifeline as a volunteer crisis support coordinator, and now she has a business where she shares her story, and she helps so many people who are struggling through similar to what she was. One of the quotes that Donna said was, "I was shocked and realised that there was a disconnect between how I perceived myself and how others perceived me." So something that was key to her recovery was creating new perceptions and smashing those old core beliefs and those old self-defeating beliefs, which had led to her becoming mentally unwell. And hearing stories was another thing that was so important for her. She said, "These stories gave me hope. I knew it was impossible to change the negative self-talk and thoughts." She knew it was possible to change the negative self-talk and thoughts, and I became committed to doing exactly that, was what she said. So new perception and hearing stories was what really helped her through. And with all these people, you can contact me if you would like more information on any of them, and I'll be able to put you in contact with them. Matt Towner is the next one in our book, and he had a horrific bike accident. So he was in Thailand and hired a moped bike, like many people do. He's an amazing guy and probably a thrill seeker and a risk taker, but obviously didn't realise what was going to happen this day. And he had the most horrific accident in the Thailand jungle late in the afternoon. The handlebars went through his stomach, his skull was cracked open, broken shoulder, kneecap, his foot was almost snapped off, broken ribs, perforated lungs and a broken back. And you might ask, how does one recover from those injuries? He very nearly died that day, but he was a guy that had always had a positive mindset. So he put positive thinking into place. And his quote was, "The power of positive thinking helped me to survive and saw me walk again when many doctors thought that I would not or could not do either." He set small goals. After 3 months in intensive care, it started with being determined to take just one step. And in life, and to be resilient, it's all about just taking one step, because that one step leads to another step, that leads to another step. The other thing that was a great strategy for him was journaling. And he says, "I was so lucky. I went from dead and dying to critical and in a coma, to bad and broken, to intense and inspired." Now, so inspired was Matt that his accident led him to write a book, which he shared his own story of survival. And he also included other people's stories of travellers' tales, and that was how I met him. Matt was a huge catalyst for me to write my book, because after he accepted the story about my 25th wedding anniversary trip to Thailand, which is called the 25th wedding anniversary trip to hell, being in his book and him accepting my story really gave me the encouragement to know that I had the potential within me to achieve my own dream of writing a book. So I'm so grateful to Matt for encouraging me in that way and creating that opportunity. Sara Lawson is the next amazing person in the book, and she has a saying, never assume. So from day one, there was assumptions and limiting experts. From day one with Sara, I had assumptions and limitations placed upon me. She says she was born flat and not breathing, resulting in cerebral palsy. Her diagnosis appeared debilitating and life-limiting. That she would never walk, talk, see, or comprehend was what was spoken over her. And to be told, for her parents to be told that, must have been absolutely devastating. But they raised her to believe that you don't say you can't, never assume. And something that was absolutely huge for Sara's development and resilience, and I won't say recovery, because being born with cerebral palsy is something that she can never change, but what she can do is change her perception and work on things that she can do. So inclusion was huge for her. And I say that because so many times people are written off for different reasons. People make judgments just looking from the outside, and they think, oh, that person could never do that, or look at them, they've got it all together, or we won't include them, or they're too far gone. But inclusion and looking at what she could do. And she says, I wanted to try everything. My siblings always found a way to help me do what they do, whether it's riding a skateboard, jumping over a fence, or climbing a tree. They found a way to make it happen. They didn't treat me any differently. And that's very much the cry of Sara's heart, is I'm a person inside who has so much life and love to give, and I want to be seen for the person that's inside, not is what package I'm in or what's the outside appearance. Another thing that was huge for Sara's helping her through her fears, because her fear of not being able to speak fluently and eloquently was a huge debilitating factor for her in her life. And the thing that she put into place as a strategy to help her with that was counselling. Now, I was very blessed to be the counsellor that she reached out to. And in our first session, I really felt to say to her that she had been fearfully and wonderfully made. And when I spoke those words to her, tears just streamed from her face for ages, like it was like about 15 minutes. And she said, it's really spoke to the depths of my heart and made me realise I had been born for a great purpose. People are walking around this earth tethered to disabilities in one way or another. It's just that mostly they are inside people's minds in the form of limiting beliefs and fears. And that was something that I'd said to Sara, that many people are walking around today with disabilities and fears, and often you can't see them, but they're in here. Today, Sara plays an integral role in Toastmasters, and she's pushing herself to really get out there and live and try as many activities as possible. Dave Mcnair, surviving a life-threatening accident at an early age led him to believe he had been saved for a greater purpose. He became a social worker working in the underbelly of Sydney, helping the homeless and marginalised in society. There'd be no one more perfect and caring to welcome into the world and embrace a little daughter with Down syndrome than Dave. And when his little girl was born, he was over the moon. One of the huge strategies for him was gratitude. He says, when she was born, we didn't realise the profound effect she would have on our life. She would help us to appreciate life, especially the little things we all take for granted. Another thing that was big for Dave as a strategy was resilience. I think many people are unaware of their own resilience, he said. One thing I've also learnt is that no one is beyond support and help. You can't write off anyone. And encouragement that he allows himself to receive and to give to others. Because of the journey I have been on, I have a greater appreciation appreciation for the diversity and potential each person has. And today, Dave is still working, helping the vulnerable in society, and is an amazing human. Sheila, she was a top high-functioning UK detective and all of a sudden suffered a stroke. Journaling was something that was a very, very big contributor to her recovery. And I'm just going to read one of the poems that she wrote in the early days, and it's called Feeling Low. Today I'm feeling low, there's just no place to go. Please let me go and hide as I feel so sad inside. Stop telling me I'll soon be well. Not one of you can really tell how much I hurt today. Please, will you all go away? This feeling that I have, it's not good, it feels so bad. The desperation in my voice, somehow I know it's not my choice. I hope it doesn't last. I thought this feeling would be past, but each day it gets much worse. Will I end up in a hearse? I don't really want to die, I just want to shut my eyes and fly so the pain can go away and I won't feel as bad today. But the feeling never comes, and my head it sort of hums with feelings of despair and what's happening out there. I know you love me so, I hope you understand and go. My rest, it is the key, even if I wallow in self-pity. So today I choose to rest, and I hope tomorrow is my best. But if tomorrow isn't grand, that leave me, please understand. So rest was a huge thing, and giving herself permission to rest. And I think that really self-love comes into that, because when we operate in self-love, we are able to put our own needs first and foremost so we can be the best that we can be. Another thing that Sheila did also was focusing on what she could do something, and she says, she says focusing on what I could do was something I was really thinking about each day. So she didn't look at what she couldn't do or her limitations, she focused on what she could do. And another amazing strategy for her was service to others. And she became a Stroke Safe ambassador. So being a Stroke Safe ambassador and sharing her story, doing something good out of what I believed was the worst experience of my life, she says, gives her joy each day. Jerry Morris was a dynamo business guy, booking speakers, meeting some of the most famous people from all over Australia and around the world. And then at 46 years old, a casual bike ride with friends led him to being run over, dragged 20 metres beneath a car and trapped underneath the car. He suffered 17 rib fractures, a major head injury, arm injury, fractures to the spine, and months of rehabilitation and reassessment of his future. Positivity and optimism were key strategies for him. He says, I always kept a positive attitude, as I'm a great believer that there is always someone worse off than you. And he was someone that always possessed amazing gratitude. He says, I learned to be grateful for being given a second chance at life. And recently he started a speakers. You'll have to get back to me on that. But his own speaking business now, where he lives in Melbourne. Yes, here it is, Book Speakers Direct. So he allows people to share their stories, and that's something that's been amazing to be part of for him. Rachel Pope, beautiful Rachel Pope. She lost the three closest men to her in her life: her father, husband, and her brother. Her father and husband died at the same age to the same cancer. And something that really helped Rachel get through the grief journey, and will not get through because we never come out the other side, but we learn to live with grief and we learn to do better each day, but was her faith. She says, we held our ground and kept our faith. And faith is actually something that quite a few of the people in the book mention in their stories, believing in something greater than themselves to help them through, and turning their will and lives over to that power each day. has been huge for the recovery of many of our speakers. She says, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's silent, steadfast and hopeful. Gratitude turns what we have now into enough. And resilience. She says there is strength in just getting back up again. Now she's a grief coach through her online community, Gifts from Grief, and Rachel offers hope to all going through this journey. Justin says, he is just such an amazing guy, full of love and life for people. And Justin has been diagnosed with bipolar and is living a journey through mental health, but very much part of his recovery is helping other people that are going through mental health battle themselves. And one of the quotes he says was keep searching for the right support and reach out. That's his strategy. He says, if I have a bad pizza, I don't stop eating pizza. I go to a different pizza shop. I found strength by sharing my weakness, and I felt liberated by removing the mask I had worn for so long. Justin found medication was very helpful for him personally, as have many, many people that have been through trauma. And regular sessions with a counsellor are essential to maintaining a good balanced life. Music for him was huge, finding a hobby and singing and just being able to do that was huge in his recovery, as well as faith. He says, faith plays a large part in my wellness and recovery journey. Today, Justin works for Mates in Construction, helping to support people battling with mental health and sharing his story so people are aware of the signs to be able to help their mates. And as we nearly come to our conclusion, Kerrie Atherton suffered a battle with infertility for 8 years. And she held on for 8 years to finally hold her long-awaited children. She says, we all go through different challenges in life, and for me, dealing with my infertility was my challenge. Acceptance. Sometimes you have to learn to let go of the picture of what you thought life would be like and learn to find joy in the story you're living. So acceptance was a key strategy for her. As was sharing her story, she says, sometimes we find strength in knowing we are not alone. And resilience means you experience, you feel, you fail, you hurt, you fall, but you keep going. And today, Kerrie is the founder of the first fertility expo on the Sunshine Coast. Last person in our book is Andino the Magician. Andy Cox is his name, and as a result of a debilitating illness which caused Andy's skin to peel off, he had to give up his job as a plumber. At the same time, his wife was struck down with Lyme disease. With barely any food or money to survive, Andy was forced to take to the streets to busk doing one of the things he loved and that kept him going, and that was magic. His healthy forms of therapy were his hobby, of course, and he says everyone has something that they use as escapism from the harshness of life, and often those things lead to more heartache, but for me, it was a healthy therapy. Speak out and seek help, he says. If you are going through hard times, tell people, I wished I had. Connection. It's crazy how a 3-minute conversation can take someone who is down and out and give them hope and life again. He had a 3-minute conversation, dared to changed his life and actually was the catalyst for him to find the healing that he needed. In conclusion to today's webinar, I just want to say a couple of things. The thing that we all have in common is the fact that through our pain, we have found our purpose. We haven't waited until we felt better, felt perfect, felt worthy to get out there and move forward. We've stepped over our pain to find our purpose. We rose up. We refused to be defeated. Pain is an event or series of events, but it is not a destination. Pain is a place where many people live forever, but we refuse to let it determine our future. We had faith in a better day. We don't keep looking back, we look forward. We have done it afraid. We have determined to make lives better for others by shining our lights and bringing hope. Resilience is a choice we all get to make. No matter how small the step, we continue to walk forward. Choose happiness over sadness. faith over fear, peace over anxiety, rest over overstriving, stillness over overthinking, routine over chaos, love over anger, the present over the past or future. And know that there is always light at the end of the tunnel and that there is always hope. And thank you for listening today. And these are our books. This is the book that you've just heard about with all the amazing people that I've shared about them today. And thank you so much to everyone for being part of our resilience webinar today. And thank you to FearLess for the amazing opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Kerrie. What a wonderful presentation and such remarkable stories that you've shared. Some great strategies for recovery, including gratitude, talking, journaling, crying, counselling, self-love, having a positive attitude, music. And also I've just been watching the chat at the moment, and we've actually got some authors from the book in there sharing, you know, some great feedback to you. So I'm sure you'll have some time to read that later. But just one question. You spoke about pre-grieving when dealing with your father.
Yeah.
Do you feel that helped you at all?
Oh, that helped me so much. I knew that if I didn't face it then, so I started pre-grieving 2 years before my dad actually passed away, because I knew that if I didn't start to that process, that when he passed away, that I probably wouldn't have coped, because I knew that I hadn't kind of quite dealt with my mother's death either. I'd locked that away. And I honestly didn't think about, every time those thoughts came up about my mum, I just pushed them. I kept pushing them back. And I knew that I had to at least start to grieve my dad, because I couldn't have done it all at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's important to take that time to process it as well. In terms of just other questions that have come from the audience, someone has asked about your books. So how do we purchase your books? Is it through a link on, have you got a shop?
Yeah, so on my website, www.storiesofhope.com.au, and just click books and it'll take you straight there.
Excellent. We did have another question come in, which was from David. It was pre-event. Is there one size fits all in developing resilience?
I don't think there is one size fits all. I think resilience comes through 2 ways, and one is going through pain and trauma in life. That just builds resilience in anyone. But we can also build resilience by doing things that are outside our comfort zone and putting ourselves in a position where we're purposely facing fears and doing things that are hard. I think the key thing, though, to the people that walk in resilience is the people that they surround themselves with. If we surround ourselves with resilient people and people that will speak truth to us and encourage us to go higher, and when I say go higher, I mean just to keep moving and to keep wanting to be a better version of ourselves and to keep doing the hard stuff, then I definitely think that that's a key factor in causing people to become more resilient in the journey.
Great, excellent. Alex, have you got any questions for Kerrie?
Yes, I do, Kerrie. One of the things you spoke to about before with you and some of the other people in your book was this idea of acceptance of your story. How difficult is that? Because there is a lot of prejudice out there against people who have mental health issues and PTSD.
Yeah.
And particularly in some of the careers that some of the people in your book had. How did they cope with that, and what were some of the mechanisms or some of the mechanisms that they used to get over that?
So do you mean themselves?
When you talked about inclusion, you talked
Okay.
about inclusion and acceptance, yeah.
I think, well, I love the saying, we find what we look for.
Mm.
And I think that there's something that, look, I used to have a victim mentality is what I would call it for myself. And I didn't want to move forward because I realise this now, but the payoff for me having attention for the suffering that I was going through, I obviously felt like I needed that at the time, but it wasn't helpful for me to be able to accept what I was going through and move forward. So I think that I'm not sure if I'm actually answering your question the right way, Alex. Acceptance is basically, for me, I had two choices. I could keep wishing that my circumstances were different, and whilever I remained in that what if things were different, I don't even want to call it a victim mentality, but I was in a mentality where whenever we keep looking back thinking what if things were different and not accepting what is, we can't move. We're actually stuck. And we can't move forward when we've got that mindset of not accepting the current situation. And acceptance is a very, very hard thing to do. But it starts with a willingness to try and come to terms with the fact that we can put that one step forward if we do accept the pain that's happened to us and try and move forward.
Thank you. No, that answers the question. Thanks very much, Kerrie.
Thank you, Alex.
Awesome. So I guess, Kerrie, do you have any last words before we wrap up? It's coming up to 1:30, so I just wanted to see if you wanted to say any last words.
No, I just want to say to everyone out there who's listening that no matter what you're going through, I think connection, and I say this all the time, connection is vital for the human soul to flourish. And it's so easy when we're going through hard times to disconnect and to feel like we're all alone. And look, I've been through that many times, and I still go through that. But the key to my recovery and to so many people that I know is, if you can't do anything else, is to just reach out and just take that step to just try and find some support and someone to talk to. And when I said to Alex, well, we find what we look for, I used to find people that could give me sympathy and just listen to what I was going through, and we would just go round and round and round in circles. But today I look for people that can offer me empathy, because those people will also be truthful with me and tell me what I need to do to move forward and to step out of the pain and into my greater purpose. And so finding people that are understanding, finding people that have walked the same journey as you, because somebody that hasn't walked your journey would not have a clue what you're going through. And that's very, very vital to recovery.
Most definitely. So starting that conversation is key, and surrounding yourself with people that are positive and understand, friends, family, work colleagues, regardless. Yeah. Just start that conversation.
Yeah.
Alex, have you got any last words? Or
No, I just want to thank you, Kerrie. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. Thank you, Kerrie, for a wonderful presentation. Some of the comments on the webinar chat were very poignant and very very appreciative of the great presentation you provided. We at FearLess wish you all the best with Stories of Hope. We'll be working with you along the way and hoping to do a lot more things together. I just want to thank everyone for their attendance today. We're looking at our next webinar potentially at the end of July, and we'll get back to you shortly about what that will entail. But thanks everyone again, and thank you very much, Kerrie, for your amazing contribution today.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to everyone that listened in.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone.
Yeah, stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and have a lovely weekend.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.